Awesome. Thank you so much, Jason. It's always exciting to see a win-win situation, like distilling, giving us smaller, cheaper models with just as incredible performance. Up next, I'd like to welcome our speakers back to the stage for a live Q&A session. So today we had a very engaged audience. You should all give yourselves a pat on the back for that. And the team has curated questions from the Q&A to bring to our speakers. I'd also like to invite those of you in the audience today who have additional questions to please post in the Q&A. And if you'd like to ask your question live on stage, you can raise your hand and our team will connect with you to bring you to the stage. You can now see our speakers populating on stage here. So please join me in welcoming our speakers. We have here Alex, Paroma, Joe, Vincent, Chris, Hoang, Dr. Arsenjani, and we should be getting Jason in just a moment. There we go. Okay, welcome to the panel. And we will get started with our first question. This is from audience member Naseem Sabatpour, and it is for our panelist, Dr. Arsenjani. The question is, how do we ensure data security and privacy during the training of internal models based on LLMs? And what measures are in place to prevent unauthorized access or data breaches of sensitive corporate information?
Great question. So on the Google Cloud Platform, you're essentially having your VPC ring fence your data. And so whatever data is in your project within your VPC with which you have control, and no one else has control unless you grant control to them, in that same fashion, we provide the capability where if you're tuning a model, for example, we will bring the model weights, a copy of the model weights, to your instance, your project, your cloud tenant, and spin up a training job inside of your project. So nothing really ever leaves the enclave of your VPC. And the tuning and training is conducted there. The results of the model weights, the actual epochs, the versions that you'd like to stabilize and save, you can do so again in that same tenant. And so nothing ever leaves the tenant. Everything is conducted, all the training and tuning is conducted there. So everything is private and secure. Your data that you generate, the models that you create, the code that you generate are essentially all considered to be customer data, and they're all safe and secure inside your VPC in your Google Cloud tenant.
Awesome answer. That sounds like a great solution to that. Thank you. Our next question is from Thomas Tam for our panelist, Joe. And the question is, how's the adoption of Llama 2 in the healthcare industry? Are we seeing actual deployment given the high stake nature of healthcare?
Yeah, I saw Jeanette had emailed me on this earlier. I think, I think it's been interesting. Like, adoption. Let me take a step back and talk about adoption more generally. It's actually been pretty insane. And we're kind of like a horizontal, right? We don't really have an opinion, like we're not opinionated on how people use like Llama models. We work obviously with a ton of enterprises through Meta and through our business and our collaborations, but we're not really opinionated. That said, like the adoption has been crazy. Like the number of downloads, like 30 million downloads in like the last 30 days, something like that. I am seeing like some healthcare usage for sure. Like I was having dinner this week with a CTO of one of the healthcare providers, and a lot of these aren't public yet, and but the use cases are going to come fast and furious. I think because a lot of these things actually, they're not sexy applications. Like a lot of them are, obviously agents, but also just like things like summarization of healthcare records. Like when you have, for example, like 500 pages of healthcare information or your medical records, like being able to like effectively summarize it and then be able to essentially converse with your records. I mean, this is very clearly like a RAG type of application, where you have some type of ground truth, which is your own records, but you want to be able to summarize and then be able to kind of inspect and ask questions about your records and stuff. So there's like pretty basic like applications like that, which like aren't that exciting, but like it's actually pretty transformational given how like high, touch or how expensive that application is today with the level of like human interaction or how much humans are involved with it. So the answer definitely is yes. There's startups as well as big biotech big healthcare providers, actually, and biotech companies that are using Llama, and you're probably going to see those coming public pretty soon. But in short, totally.
Thank you. Loved both the high level overview as well as a specific example there. Okay, the next question here is from Kalyan Sathanam, and it is once again for Dr. Arsenjani. The question is, how do you reduce false positives or false narratives out of the LLM models generated that will be consumed?
Well, that's $1 million question, right? So I would say that there are a number of patterns you can implement, each of which reduces the amount of falsity, hallucination, and just, sometimes just rambling of the model. You can try to ring fence this more and more by essentially starting out with good prompt engineering, using very solid techniques, in context learning, chain of thought, techniques like that, even React, reasoning, planning, acting kind of paradigm. Then you can start migrating to doing retrieval augmentation so that the data that's necessary to be provided to your LLM is actually captured pretty much in real time, or relevant data is at least brought to bear with the prompt. And so now the prompt has additional data and context that is now set to the language model. You can augment that in various ways. You can do vector searches in a vector database. You can do knowledge graph searches that portray the kind of the ground truth of whatever it is you're asking about in that particular domain. Let's say it's financial services and it's about tax auditing. So the tax rules are grounded. And then the response you get is going to be predominantly correct. The next step you can take is the basic tuning of the model. So we offer various types of tuning, for example, on the Google Cloud Platform, one of which is adapter tuning. So you create a layer around your model that essentially then is passed through to the foundation model. So you don't have a student teacher kind of model that is completely distilled. In that particular case for adapter tuning, you have a model that's more of a wrapper. The second way is to do low rank adaptation, where you have a smaller matrix that gets multiplied into a larger matrix to constitute all of your weights. That smaller matrix can be updated, the weights can be updated and fine-tuned so that it's dispersed throughout your neural network. And of course, then you can fully fine-tune your models as well. So in that spectrum, you basically are performing stronger prompt engineering, augmenting it with retrievals, performing tuning capabilities so that the domain is more specific. The answers are actually coming from the learning of the domain rather than Wikipedia, for example. The fourth thing you can do, for example, we provide on the Google Cloud Platform, is the grounding, the factual grounding. We can perform internal to the organization or external searches that provide you with citations. Imagine a URL that says, hey, click here, this is where I got the response from, or a list of URLs inside your organization. These are the PDF documents that we pulled to give you your answer. And then the fifth one are the recitation checks. So if you're generating, for example, you're generating code and you'd like to make sure that this code isn't infringing on anybody else's, the actual recitation check goes out and pulls information from a repo, and if it's similar, we'll bring it up. And then you can cross-check to see if this is permissible from a legal perspective or not. So in combination of all these 5 approaches, you will tend to get decreasing amounts of hallucination, better quality, and the expected output that you need.
Thank you.
And just to piggyback onto Ali's awesome answer, I'm not going to beat it in terms of comprehensiveness. So just to kind of tack on a little bit, one metaphor, and I got the thumbs up from Dawei, who wrote the RAG paper, that this is an okay metaphor. is that a lot of these techniques are actually also complementary. So I fully agree with Ali with your kind of progression, and that's actually, we think about it a lot at Snorkel, is how can we kind of have the right guidance of going through that progression. We did a nice demo together recently of doing that for fine tuning, but they're also complementary tools, and you'll often find yourself using multiple together. So if you think about like a simple example of, think of an LLM out of the box as kind of like a med student, and you need a specialist to make a diagnosis. Well, you could probably guide for some of the simpler tasks, the med student through the basic procedures, getting basic patient information with just careful instructions. That's kind of like basic prompting. Then you generally, for harder tasks, need to actually train them, and that's some form of fine tuning. And whether you do it LoRa or full range fine tuning or an adapter model, which has the cool privacy and modularity things, some form of fine tuning. That's kind of like your specialty training to become an oncologist. And then even a fully trained oncologist will need to access some external information like the patient's lab values or the latest scientific literature. And that's kind of like retrieval augmented generation. So I think it's the perfect answer of like, you got to kind of progress. That's also why evaluations are so important. Like we talked about in some of the earlier sessions, to know, are you there yet? And where do you need to kind of use more advanced tools? But then also, they're often going to be multiple of them together. And then of course, the shameless plug for our line of work, the Snorkel group, both academic and company, is the quality of the data that you're putting in at each step, whether it's going into a prompt for in context, whether it's going in via a RAG kind of pipeline, or whether it's for some kind of fine tuning or pre-training. That's where we see a lot of the deltas. How good is that data, not just in a generic sense, but for that specific use case?
Thank you for tacking on there, Alex. And it goes nicely into our next question, which is actually for you, Alex, from Antonio Valderrabanos. And the question is, data-centric AI was born as a way to stress data in AI and LLMs. Do you think it's making a difference in the industry? Where is data being used most? And is it changing dev habits?
Sorry, Becky, could you repeat the first part of that question? My audio went out for a second.
Yeah. Data-centric AI was born as a way to stress data in AI and LLMs. Do you think it's making a difference in the industry? Where is data being used most? Is it changing dev habits?
Awesome question. So, and I think I used up some of my budget of time, so I'll be quick here and I'll let the others jump in. But I think the high level ideas about data-centric AI development, of course, everything always revolves around data. Actually, the first usage of the term LLM, I believe, was a Google paper back in 2007, where they used 100x the amount of data and got a massive step up in quality. So we've always known data is important. Our point with over the last decade of working on data-centric AI is that the workflow, the developer workflow, is going to center a lot more around data and developing data more so than developing models and algorithms. And I think over the last decade of studying this, when we started, it was data was a janitorial thing that no one cared about, and I got told that we'd never publish in that area. Then when we spun out the company, it was kind of a pain point that you got blocked on before you could train your models. Now, as we enter the LLM era, it's increasingly kind of the only way that you can actually, for most users, do the development, because the models are they're getting standardized thanks to the great work of, well, here we have Meta and Google represented here, and getting more accessible, but also more black box. You can't say, oh, my model's messing up on this type of patient or this type of customer interaction. I better go tweak the model architecture and invent something better than a transformer, or tweak one of the 500 billion parameters. Most likely, and almost exclusively, your interface is going to be data. How you develop, select, clean, curate, label some new data to put into the model to fix that error mode or to improve it. So I think the shift to LLMs has really accentuated the importance of data as the development interface, which is really exciting. And I think all the exciting work is ahead now that people are even more aware, and it's not just a tool, it's increasingly the tool for how you develop AI as data development.
I have to add something to what Alex, you were fantastic in that answer. Thank you for that. The small footnote to what Alex was saying is that if you all remember ImageNet, the important inflection moment in ImageNet was the large amount of data that was collected and made ImageNet possible to detect images. So I'm just pointing to what Alex is saying, that if we get the data equation right, a lot of what we put as effort into the right algorithms can be shifted to getting the right data in, so the existing algorithms can do very well in what it is that they're doing. So in terms of optimization, if we get our data right, we can optimize the heck out of this.
I completely agree. And to finish the part of the Google paper story that I love, it's my favorite part, is this is a 2007 paper. Back in the 90s, you have all these like French, fancy French kind of algorithms for all the decoder algorithms or then just called language models. And Google used an algorithm called stupid backoff. This is a Jeff Dean paper. It's still one of the funniest academic paper trolls ever. Beat all of them because they used more, better data. And of course, there's a ton of compute and systems work that went underneath that. But not to say the algorithms aren't important, not to say the models aren't important, but for most use cases, you can kind of use a good default for those, and then focus on getting the data right for your use case and have a lot of success, like Ali said.
Awesome. Okay, I'm
If I
going to
can-
jump in here.
Can I add a couple? I'm sorry, not to belabor the point.
Yes, last comment on this question, and then we have a lot more questions.
I mean, this is a good juicy topic though, and it's snorkel centric. So I think I do like, I definitely want to plus one what Alex and Ali said. I think though that I will add that, you know, there is no data without evals or evals without data, whichever way you look at it. They are just so like linked, and so you need to think about how you evaluate your models, and you know, throwing. And it's like, and some of this is actually fairly counterintuitive. Like when you, I mean, for some people anyway, in the early days of like, you know, code versus like reasoning, for example. Like I throw more code in my training data, like, oh my God, it reasons better. Like, how did that happen? I don't know. So like data mixture is really interesting when we look at that, and then just like thinking through like, you know, then how do we adjust how we actually evaluate these things. And I think, you know, to kind of add, I guess maybe fuel to the fire of the data quality discussion. Like I see, for example, like researchers come and they're like, hey, I want, you know, I don't know, millions or billions or depending on the, you know, how niche the data is, like, you know, maybe 100,000, you know, annotated examples. And, you know, I've seen basically if you kind of force the quality, like conversation, if you say like, let's try 10,000, for example, instead of 100,000 or a million examples, but they're like super well, like, you know, by, for example, people with like, you know, educated backgrounds, and like you really force like high quality and you pay for it, right? It's expensive, but you pay for it. You actually get better results with smaller data than you would in like even orders of magnitude larger that is like kind of okay annotations. So it's like a really tricky subject, and this is why like evals and is such a hot topic, and why the research, if you look at the number of papers that are being published in evals right now, it's like it's crazy. But and we're also, you know, suddenly waking up to the fact that data really does matter, but it's not like just volumes of data. It really is the quality and even the kinds of data and how you mix these things, and even how modalities can interrupt or like interact with each other in kind of latent space, and like so there's a lot going on in the space. It's kind of exciting, but it does actually all contribute to how well your model in the end does perform. So
it's super exciting. I can't just one quick tack on because it's such a good point. Like the first two chats that we had today were heavily about evaluation, and it also ties into that data mixture point, because what we're seeing a lot, and that's why, you know, if you look at the evolving or really going back years, what we've worked on as a team, the Snorkel branding, is data development, not just labeling, because a lot of the increasingly we're seeing it's about finding the right samples, mixtures, and clean subsets of data, not just how you label it. But you can't know what distribution or what, you know, mixture is optimal unless you have an evaluation benchmark that is specific to your setting. It's almost like database administration. It's like there's not a correct way to tune a database. There's a correct way to tune a database for an expected query workload over your data sets, right? I think we're seeing, or we need to get through, like we taught a whole generation of data scientists, don't peek at the test set, it's cheating, which is still a lesson that we need to remember given some of the evals out there. But some of the takeaway from that was don't think about the test set, don't think about evaluation. And now we're having to catch up, because if you don't get evaluation right, you can't get data development right.
Okay, 100%. I'm jumping in here. Sorry to cut you guys off, but fascinating discussion. Love how engaged you all are in that concept. I'm sure it'll spark more conversations after. I'd actually love to pull Chris into this conversation. We have a question from a guest, Hari Iyer, and the question here is, Andrew Ning's course says that 1,000 good data points are enough for fine-tuning. Does that align with your experience? This touches on all of what we were just talking about with having quality data.
Yeah, well, and I think Joe was just speaking to that. I think that's been proven in some applications. I don't know how general a statement that's going to turn out to be when you start to apply this to real business problems. So in my mind, I think quality is paramount, but numerically, how much high quality examples you need is probably going to depend on the kind of application that you're building, as well as the diversity of tasks that you're trying to train your model on. The wider the diversity, the more high quality examples you're going to need across different kind of categories. You're probably going to need more data. But I've seen it really run the gamut as far as how many data points you really need. And again, I think it depends on the kinds of tasks and how specific, they are. And, human hours really matter there. So.
Yeah, that aligns with the theme of really being adapted to the task, to the problem you're trying to solve. Thank you. Okay, our next question is from Alex Young, and it's for Vincent. The question is, what are the cons of using open source training data, and how can Snorkel help us, given human-generated data is so expensive?
Yeah, it's a good question. I wouldn't necessarily frame it as, cons of open source data necessarily. I think it's more that, when you think about how to adapt models to an organization or individual specific objectives, right? Even you're going to need data that actually matches that distribution, right? So there's only so much open data out there that matches very specific nuance, healthcare or life sciences or, insurance document types, right? That's actually the differentiator for a lot of companies who are building AI internally is, hey, we have a schema, we have a set of proprietary documents that, we want to align to. That's where, at least in the Snorkel view, we see proprietary data coming in. And frankly, a lot of the workflows we're building around on the product side are all about helping folks efficiently make use of that and develop it so it can be kind of complementary to the awesome data sets and resources that are out there in the open web. So at the end of the day, it just comes down to adaptation to specific objectives and use cases, where, open data is frankly just not enough in terms of getting to those distributions.
Thank you. Okay, we have 1 minute left. This is going to be, I want one sentence from each of you and no more. The question is, how do you stay up to date with the latest trends in LLMs? Jason, would you like to go first?
Sure. Have really smart friends and colleagues who share stuff they like and to distribute the task amongst your friends and read what they are excited about and pass along.
Thank you. Hoang?
A +1 to that. Having a group of friends and just discussing and just like sharing papers when you see them. Twitter is a great source as well. Twitter, LinkedIn, they share people. Yeah.
Thank you. Joe?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a variation on the same answer, but like I, at Meta, we have like a really strong community around AI. Obviously, I have a ton of friends outside in AI, but we talk about stuff, we discuss on workplace, we share, we have perspective. So really, it's like the community around me is how I mean, everything's obviously, but like I learn with the community and learn from others. So it's not just the papers and stuff; it's also the perspectives. It's actually pretty interesting.
Okay, thank you. One sentence here: Vincent, Chris, Dr. Arsenjani, and then Alex.
Yeah, I agree with everything I said. On the note of kind of data mixtures for training ourselves, I'd say actually anchoring on customer use cases, right? The more you're actually tied into building real use cases and real problems, I think that's often the highest signal, that I like to upweight in terms of my training samples. Forgive the silly pun, but customers.
Chris.
Yeah, so +1 to what's everything that's been said. I would also add though to hedge, and if you see a paper that you think is interesting that nobody's talking about, like promote it and talk about why you think it's interesting, because we're all in the Wild West right now. So let's keep innovating and not just be in an echo chamber. Let's look for the stuff that's interesting and continue to innovate.
Thank you. Dr. Arsenjani?
I like to work from real problems that are out there in the field and then work backwards from them to try to find out what are the latest and greatest papers pertaining to that segment of the problem. I research that and I try to get out of my own echo chamber, my immediate colleagues, and I try to go beyond that so that I can understand the different types of research that would impact in a positive way the solution to that real world problem.
Great idea. Okay, Alex, one sentence. Do you think you can do it?
Absolutely not. I'll do close to it. So my first answer I'm only half joking. Is if anyone's seen Stanley Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange, the scene where they strap the guy to the chair and they hold the eyes open, they play the scene. Yeah, exactly. That's probably the only practical way to actually stay up to date on every single paper about AI and LLMs these days, because it's crazy. So I think, joking aside, the way to stay grounded, Vincent and Ali said it perfectly. Stay grounded in real use cases. I think about it as like, you have this big space of ideas projected onto something tangible and concrete that you can play around with, something that you're building. That's the best way to internalize. The other thing I'd say is I +1 to community. And the last thing I'd say is just, I think it's healthy for us all to keep in mind that we're in a phase of expansion in the field. And whenever there's this much energy in a space, there's a strong, sociological incentive to like kind of come up with new terms and to make everything sound new and different. And it becomes extraordinarily overwhelming. Now, if you look at it in the bigger context, a lot of these ideas have been around for decades. We're reinventing new things on Twitter, but they actually kind of exist. Things are small variations on them. But it takes a while for the craziness to kind of contract back down to a standardized set of terms. So just keep in mind that there aren't actually as many new ideas as it seems. And that shouldn't dampen the excitement. It should just maybe reassure that the things will settle. A lot of the great work that happens during the contraction phase of the field is cleaning up concepts and showing which ones are equivalent and how they all fit together. We're going to be entering into that, and that'll make it a little bit less overwhelming, I think.
Thank you. And thank you all for attending this summit today. Thank you to our panelists for joining for this Q&A. My biggest takeaway from today is that generic LLMs are really becoming the new baseline for modern enterprise AI. And regardless of whether you're adopting, of where you are in adopting LLMs, AI data development is essential to deliver the performance and reliability that enterprises expect for their high-value AI use cases. So thank you all. When you leave the webinar, you'll be offered a short survey in a browser window. We would greatly appreciate it if you would take a moment to provide your immediate feedback on today's event. Also, as a reminder, the full event was recorded and a link to the talks will be shared next week. A member of the Snorkel team will be in touch to see if you'd like to learn more about Snorkel Flow. We look forward to connecting with you all on your AI journey. If you'd like to get started today, you can use the link or the QR code you can see on your screen now, and our team would be delighted to connect with you. It was my pleasure to be your host, and thank you again for joining us today. We hope to see you at a future webinar or event, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks
so
everyone.
much.